There's something most men in their 50s have never been told. Not because the information doesn't exist, not because nobody knows it, but because nobody has ever sat down with them, looked them in the eye, and explained it clearly, honestly, and without embarrassment. What is actually happening in your partner's body and mind during the most intimate moments you share together? Most men assume they understand this. They've been in relationships. They've been intimate. They have experience. But experience without understanding is not the same thing as knowledge. And the gap between what most men over 50 think is happening for their partner during intimacy and what is actually happening, physiologically, neurochemically, psychologically, is wider than most would expect. That gap has consequences. Not dramatic ones usually, but quiet, cumulative ones. A subtle distance that develops over time. A sense that something that should feel deeply connected sometimes feels slightly off. Moments that could have been genuinely profound that end up being merely adequate. Today, I'm closing that gap. I'm going to walk you through exactly what is happening in your partner's body and mind during intimate connection, the physiology, the neurochemistry, the psychology of trust and vulnerability. And I'm going to tell you clearly and practically what understanding all of this means for how you show up in your intimate relationship. Let's begin. What her body needs before anything else. To understand what a woman experiences during intimacy, you first need to understand the physiological state her body needs to reach before that experience can be what it is truly capable of being. Because intimacy experienced in a body that is fully and properly aroused is a qualitatively different experience from intimacy in a body that is not. And the difference is not subtle. Female arousal is a process. It unfolds over time, in a specific physiological sequence. It cannot be rushed without real consequences. And for men in their 50s, understanding this sequence is among the most important things you can know about your partner's experience. It begins in the brain. Arousal is initiated by the nervous system in response to psychological, emotional, or physical stimulation, or some combination of all three. When arousal begins, the parasympathetic branch of the autonomic nervous system activates, driving increased blood flow to the pelvic region. This vascular response is the engine of everything that follows. As blood flow increases, the clitoral complex, which includes not just the small external structure most men are aware of, but a full internal network of sensitive tissue extending along the vaginal canal, becomes engorged. This engorgement dramatically increases the sensitivity of every nerve ending in the region. At the same time, the vaginal walls begin producing natural lubrication. This is both a sign of arousal and a functional requirement for comfortable, pleasurable intimacy. Simultaneously, a process called vaginal tenting occurs. The upper portion of the vaginal canal lengthens and expands, creating necessary internal space. The pelvic floor muscles, which in their natural resting state maintain protective tension, progressively relax as arousal deepens. This relaxation is what allows physical intimacy to feel welcoming rather than resistant. Here is what matters most for men over 50. This entire sequence takes time. For a woman to be fully aroused, engorged, lubricated, internally expanded, and pelvic floor relaxed requires somewhere between 15 and 45 minutes of genuine attentive stimulation. And this time frame tends to increase rather than decrease with age. For women in their late 40s and 50s, hormonal changes significantly affect the speed and completeness of arousal. The process typically requires more time, more attentiveness, and often benefits from supplemental lubrication, regardless of arousal level. This is not a problem to be solved. It is simply a physiological reality that calls for a different kind of patience and presence. When intimacy begins before this preparation is complete, everything that follows is diminished. The nerve structures that produce the most intense sensation are only fully activated after the complete arousal sequence has occurred. Moving too quickly doesn't just reduce her pleasure, it can cause genuine discomfort. For men over 50, this understanding has a specific practical implication. The anxiety many men feel about maintaining arousal can create pressure to move quickly, a sense that the window might close if things move too slowly. That anxiety, completely understandable, works directly against the physiological preparation that makes intimacy genuinely good for her. The investment of time in the arousal process is not a preamble to the real event. It is a non-negotiable part of the real event, the part that determines whether what follows is genuinely pleasurable or merely tolerable. What she experiences. During intimacy, the physiology and the psychology. When intimacy occurs in a body that has been fully and properly prepared, The experience for a woman is neurologically and psychologically complex in ways that most men have never had explained to them. From a purely physical standpoint, initial penetration activates a dense concentration of nerve endings simultaneously, the engorged internal structures pressing against the vaginal walls from inside, creating indirect stimulation of the full clitoral complex in addition to any direct external stimulation. This is why intimacy in a fully aroused woman produces sensation that is qualitatively different from, and considerably more intense than, intimacy in a woman who has not completed the arousal process. The nerve structures that generate the most profound sensation are only fully sensitized after complete arousal. The sensation women often describe during intimacy, a feeling of fullness, of being deeply grounded, is a neurological event. It is produced by the simultaneous engagement of multiple sets of nerve endings throughout the pelvic region, creating a distributed, deep sensory experience that is quite different from localized surface sensation. From a neurochemical standpoint, intimacy during a desired, safe, emotionally connected encounter triggers a significant release of oxytocin, the neurochemical most directly associated with feelings of trust, safety, genuine emotional closeness, and connection. This oxytocin release is not metaphorical. It is a documented biological event. It produces a specific emotional state, a sense of being fully met by another person, of genuine closeness that feels both physical and emotional at once. And critically, this oxytocin release is amplified by emotional safety. When she trusts you, when she feels genuinely desired rather than merely used. When the relational environment between you is characterized by real care and attunement, the neurochemical experience of intimacy in that context is substantially richer than the same physical act in an emotionally disconnected environment. Your emotional presence during intimacy is not separate from her physical experience of it. It directly shapes her neurochemistry. The trust dimension, what she is actually giving you. There is something about intimacy that most men have never been invited to consider from her perspective. Physical intimacy requires a degree of vulnerability that has no direct male equivalent. To be physically open with another person, to allow entry into your body, requires trust. Not just the general trust of a relationship, but a specific moment-by-moment trust that her body actively chooses rather than merely permits. The pelvic floor muscles, protective by nature, have to consciously release. This does not happen involuntarily. The body knows the difference between genuine safety and performed safety. A woman who is physically present but psychologically unprotected, or who is rushed before she is ready, will not fully open regardless of how willing she appears on the surface. For women in their 50s, this vulnerability often carries an additional dimension. The physical changes that come with age, the body shifting, the awareness of how time has changed her, mean that your genuine, expressed, specific desire for her in this body at this age matters in ways that go deeper than emotional reassurance. When you approach your partner with authentic desire for who she actually is, not who she was 10 years ago, not a general appreciation but specific, present, real desire for her, you are telling her nervous system that it is safe to be fully open. A body that is told it is safe opens fully. A body that is uncertain protects itself. And a body that is protected cannot access the depth of pleasure that full openness makes possible. Emotional presence is not a courtesy in intimate relationships. It is a physiological prerequisite. And what she needs from you: pace, attention, and presence. Now let me translate all of this into practical understanding. Initial intimacy should begin slowly. This is not about timidity. It is anatomy. Even in a fully aroused body, the gradual progression of initial penetration gives her body the time to respond incrementally, deepening relaxation, expanding accommodation, continuous arousal. Beginning slowly and deepening gradually over the first few minutes gives her body time to welcome each increment of depth. Moving too quickly, regardless of how aroused she appears, compresses a process designed to unfold gradually. It reduces a layered, continuous sensory experience to a single moment, and that reduction costs both of you something real. She needs your attention. Her breath is your most reliable real-time guide. Deepening rhythmic breathing tells you her body is responding positively. Held breath, shallow tension, signals that something needs to slow down or adjust. Her muscle responses, relaxation or engagement of her thighs, abdomen, pelvic floor, communicate the same information. The woman who reaches for you, who moves to meet your movements, is telling you clearly that she is receiving what she needs. The woman who becomes still, holds her breath, or creates subtle distance is communicating equally clearly that something needs to shift. Reading this information requires only one thing: that you are genuinely paying attention. Not to your own sensations, not to your performance, not to the internal question of whether you are doing well enough. To her breath, to the quality of her response. When a man's attention is genuinely directed outward during intimacy, he receives continuous, accurate information about his partner's experience. When his attention turns inward toward self-monitoring, he loses access to all of it. Men in their 50s have a genuine advantage here. The performance anxiety that dominates younger sexuality narrows attention inward. Greater experience and reduced performance pressure opens the possibility of genuine outward attentiveness that many younger men cannot access. She needs consistency at the right moment. Female orgasm depends on the maintenance of a consistent stimulus pattern in the period approaching climax. Any significant change in pace, depth, angle, or pressure in the final stages of building arousal disrupts the pattern and can reduce or eliminate what was building. When she communicates, verbally or through her body, that she is close, the most important thing you can do is maintain exactly what you are doing. Do not change pace, do not change angle, do not introduce something new, simply continue exactly what has been working. This is one of the most common and most consequential mistakes men make, changing technique at precisely the moment when consistency is the only thing required. Why? What happens after matters, as much as during. Her experience of intimacy does not end at the moment of physical separation. The oxytocin that has been elevated throughout the encounter remains elevated in the post-intimacy period. This is the period of greatest emotional openness and vulnerability in the entire intimate experience. And it is the period that women most consistently describe as the one where they feel most, or least, genuinely connected to their partner. A man who remains present after intimacy, who does not immediately disengage, reach for his phone, or shift into practical logistics, who simply allows the warmth and closeness to continue for a few unhurried minutes, is giving his partner something neurochemically real. He is telling her nervous system, in the language the nervous system understands most clearly: you are safe here. This connection is real. You are not here only for a physical purpose. That message, delivered consistently, shapes the depth of her trust and openness in every subsequent intimate encounter. The inverse is equally true. The man who withdraws immediately after intimacy, physically or emotionally, when she is most neurochemically primed for connection, sends a message her nervous system registers just as clearly. And delivered consistently over time, that message gradually teaches her nervous system to protect itself from the vulnerability of intimacy, a closing that both partners feel, and that progressively diminishes the quality of what they share. For men in their 50s, post-intimacy presence is one of the areas where the emotional maturity of this stage of life provides a genuine and significant advantage. The ability to remain still, warm, and present after intimacy, without urgency, without distraction, is an expression of exactly the kind of emotional intelligence that women at this stage of life consistently identify as the most important quality in a partner. Your partner's experience of intimacy is physiologically, neurochemically, and psychologically complex. Her body requires a specific sequence of arousal preparation, and that preparation cannot be rushed without real consequences for her experience. The intimacy itself engages her full internal nervous system and triggers an oxytocin surge that is amplified by genuine emotional safety. Her vulnerability in those moments is real and conscious, and your emotional presence is not a courtesy. It is a physiological prerequisite for her full experience. She needs pace. She needs your genuine attention. She needs consistency at the moment it matters most. And she needs your presence to continue into the aftermath in ways that honor the neurochemical state that real intimacy creates. The man who understands all of this is not performing a series of techniques. He is genuinely present with another human being in one of the most intimate and neurologically rich experiences available to two people. That understanding, the physiological knowledge, the emotional presence, the specific attentiveness, is what produces the kind of intimacy that deepens rather than diminishes over time. It is available to every man who chooses to develop it. And now, you have the foundation to begin.